Millions of species, from tiny ants to giant whales. How did nature create such staggering diversity? And if you think evolution is something distant and invisible, you are mistaken. It is happening right now, around us, inside us, and even deciding what our future will be. For centuries, people believed that animal life forms were created once and remain unchanged. But science has shown the living world is constant motion, an eternal flow of changes and amazing transformations. In this video, you will learn what shocking conclusion Darwin made about human origins and why your own DNA is irrefutable proof that he was right. Why some animals have barely changed in hundreds of millions of years, while others have disappeared forever. And how microscopic bacteria are neutralizing our most powerful medicines, and why this is a clear example of evolution in action. Prepare yourselves, our journey begins right now.
Although the classic example of rapid evolution is often the story of the insecticide DDT, in the 21st century we have faced an even more vivid and dangerous demonstration of it. After Alexander Fleming's discovery of penicillin in 1928, it seemed the era of deadly bacterial infections was coming to an end. Antibiotics became a miracle cure, saving millions of lives. However, just as with insects, within the huge populations of bacteria, there were always lucky ones, individual cells that, due to random mutations, possessed innate resistance to the drug. When millions of vulnerable bacteria died, these few surviving individuals received ideal conditions to reproduce. How did they manage it? By passing the resistance gene to their descendants, they gave rise to new generations completely immune to the medicine. This process, repeated worldwide, led to the emergence of superbugs resistant to many types of antibiotics, a global health problem today. So what is this all-powerful process, capable of nullifying the greatest medical discoveries? This very process lies at the heart of evolution. All living organisms are in a struggle for survival. Random natural variability among individuals allows them to solve these challenges more successfully and, consequently, to reproduce more actively. As a result, their offspring begin to outnumber the offspring of less adapted individuals, and their useful traits can spread throughout the entire population over generations. But how does a completely new creature arise from small changes? More often, such an evolutionary struggle leads to changes in part of a population, turning it into a race, an interspecific group. Over time, the changes can become so radical that interbreeding between members of this race and their ancestors becomes impossible. This is how a new species is formed. However, one should not expect a new species to appear before your very eyes. Natural evolution occurs much more slowly than the formation of superbugs or pesticide-resistant insects. It can take hundreds of generations for minor changes to become fixed, which is extremely rare to observe. But how did scientists peer into this deep past without a time machine? The answer turned out to be right under their feet.
The record in stone. In the 19th century, when the theory of evolution first appeared in a coherent form, chemicals like DDT were not yet known. Therefore, there was no opportunity to observe evolution in action. How then did scientists figure it out? Proponents of the new theory relied on two indisputable facts: the infinite diversity of species in the modern world and the mysterious differences between these species and long-extinct ones, whose remains were preserved in ancient rocks as fossils. For a long time, evolutionary ideas could not develop due to theological views on the age of the Earth. For example, according to the Irish Archbishop James Ussher, who lived in the mid-17th century, the world was created on October 23, 4004 BC at 9 o'clock in the morning. Accurate to the hour. He reached this conclusion based on studying the Book of Genesis, and such a short timescale completely ruled out the possibility of species evolution. Imagine the entire history of the world fit into one thick book. But is this really the case? Even before Darwin, scientists tried to explain the mystery of fossils without entering into direct conflict with the idea of creation. For instance, the French naturalist Georges Cuvier, the father of paleontology, irrefutably proved the fact of ancient species extinction. He acknowledged the diversity of living creatures found in different geological layers, but considered species extinction to be the result not of gradual evolution, but of global catastrophes. According to his theory of catastrophism, Earth's history was a series of abrupt changes that destroyed all life in a region, after which it was repopulated by newly created species, as if nature periodically pressed the reboot button.
Archbishop Usher's calculations were considered generally accepted until the end of the 18th century, but it was then that the stones began to tell their story. Geologists began to doubt that the formation of mountains, valleys, and mountain systems took less than 6,000 years. Observations of processes such as rock movement, strata displacement, and erosion suggested that all geological changes occur extremely slowly and last for millions of years. This discovery changed everything. The results of the new dating meant that the animal remains found in sedimentary rocks must also be several hundred million years old. The creation of the geologic timescale made it possible to determine the age of such finds, like, for example, the dinosaur remains in the state of Utah. It was difficult to establish an exact number, but the relative age was determined by a simple principle. Over time, later strata are deposited on top of earlier ones. It's like the layers of a cake. The bottom one is the oldest, the top one is the freshest. This also applies to any animal fossils found in these strata. For example, fossilized ammonites, cephalopods that lived 200 to 70 million years ago, became ideal time markers. They help to accurately determine the relative age of rock layers, making the study of fossils one of the key ways of compiling a geochronology.
So, what did this stone chronicle tell? The preserved fossils made it possible to establish two facts. Many of the species that once inhabited the Earth have long since disappeared, and more importantly, some of them share common features with similar species of modern animals. Although the reasons for the disappearance of some giants, such as the dinosaurs, are still not precisely known, the conclusion is inevitable. Extinct animals reflect specific stages of the evolutionary process. And here, an amazing question arises. Why did some creatures disappear while others, as if frozen in time, have barely changed? It's all about the environment. If conditions remain stable, as for example in the deep water regions of the ocean where coelacanths live, or in the ecosystems of relic plants like ginkgo, then the species simply had no need to change. Their structure was already perfectly suited to their surroundings. Conversely, animals living in dynamic ecosystems faced climate change, catastrophes, and new competitors. In such conditions, either adaptation occurred and new species appeared, or the organism disappeared forever. The stone book of history was open. All that remained was to find someone who could read it, and such a person soon appeared.
Endless diversity. In September 1831, 22-year-old Charles Darwin set off on a voyage on the ship Beagle as a naturalist. It is noteworthy that he had not studied botany, zoology, or geology in educational institutions, but during the journey, he collected enough material to last him a lifetime of scientific work. Among the most significant were his observations on the Galapagos Islands, where he studied species differences, especially among finches and giant tortoises. It was these islands, lost in the ocean, that became a living laboratory of evolution for him. But the real mystery that changed science turned out to be the Galapagos finches, 14 distinct but very closely related species. They differed in their feeding habits and geographic ranges and did not interbreed. Some ate seeds, which is typical for finches. Others ate plant buds and fruits. Still others ate insects. Each island represented a separate habitat and was inhabited by a specific species. However, in Darwin's opinion, all the finch species looked suspiciously similar, as if they had a common ancestor. How was this possible? In an attempt to explain this diversity, Darwin turned to existing theories. At the beginning of the century, the French naturalist Jean-Baptiste Lamarck, who was the first to draw a clear distinction between invertebrates and vertebrates, published his theory of the origin of species. Lamarck proposed that individual animals adapt to their environment during their lifetime, and that offspring inherit these acquired characteristics from their ancestors. For example, a giraffe stretches its neck, and its children's necks become longer. Modern genetics has proven that acquired traits not encoded in DNA are not inherited. However, modern research in epigenetics shows that things are somewhat more complex. It turned out that lifestyle and environmental factors can leave chemical marks on DNA, which do not change the genes themselves but affect their activity. It's like notes in the margins of the gene book. And some of these marks can indeed be passed on to descendants for several generations, adding a new, unexpected layer to the understanding of heredity.
But Darwin went another way. He proposed a different theory, which was based on the indisputable fact that animal offspring are born in huge numbers, and that most of them die before reaching sexual maturity. But Darwin also noticed that all animals that reproduce sexually are unique and differ from one another. These differences either make it easier or harder for the animal to struggle for survival. Animals with useful traits survive more often than those without them. It's simple. Whoever has the better tools for survival wins. To promote evolution, useful traits must be passed on to subsequent generations. So what was his brilliant idea? According to his theory, the Galapagos finches evolved primarily through the survival and reproduction of individuals with useful variability. Darwin called this process natural selection. According to Darwin's theory, the finches diverged in the process of colonizing different habitats and as a result of changes in the settlers themselves to adapt to local conditions. Thus, a population of finches feeding in a cactus-covered area evolved differently than one that inhabited dense forests. Under the influence of behavioral differences, these possibilities gradually narrowed until genetic incompatibility arose between the races. This is how separate species of finches were formed, and this process is ongoing. For example, Hamadryas baboons and olive baboons do not interbreed because they are separated by behavior and distant habitats. The Hamadryas lives in northeast Africa and the olive baboon further south. The very definition of a species is closely linked to reproductive isolation. The best proof? Hybrids. When humans break down the natural mechanisms of animal isolation, interspecies breeding becomes possible, for example between a horse and a zebra. However, their offspring, zebroids, are almost always infertile. This inability of hybrids to produce their own offspring is crucial evidence that their parents, despite their external similarity, belong to different, evolutionarily distinct species. The theory was formulated, but the world was not yet ready to accept it.
Monkeys and angels. Having created his main scientific theory in the late 1830s, Darwin spent the next 20 years searching for evidence. Only in 1859 did he publish his ideas in response to an article by another naturalist, Alfred Russel Wallace, who had proposed a very similar theory. But it was Darwin's book on the origin of species that had the effect of an exploding bomb. His scientific work was distinguished by its extraordinary thoroughness. It sold out instantly, sparking outrage among traditionalist scientists, who regarded it as almost blasphemy. Many were happy to abandon the biblical story of creation in favor of Darwin's theory, but only a few were prepared to accept the most scandalous proposition, that man is also a product of evolution and that his ancestor is merely an ape. This concept remains unpalatable to this day for those who consider man a special creation of God. But science is not a matter of faith, it is a matter of evidence. Meanwhile, scientists still debate the details and pace of the evolutionary process. Is evolution always a slow marathon, or is it sometimes a sprint? The recent notion of evolution as a gradual process has been supplemented by the theory of punctuated equilibrium,
according to which long periods of species stasis are replaced by periods of rapid development. This idea arose under the influence of the fact that sharp changes are often observed in the fossil record. However, over the past decades, paleontology has made huge strides, filling in many of these apparent gaps. Hundreds of transitional forms have been found that clearly demonstrate the smoothness of evolutionary transformations. Striking examples include Tiktaalik rosé, a fish with amphibian-like features, or the fossilized remains of a feathered dinosaur, proving their direct relationship to birds. These findings have filled many gaps in our knowledge. Such hypotheses may bring changes to the structure of the theory, but they cannot undermine its foundations.
Today, we have evidence Darwin could not have dreamed of. We see evolution not only in stones, but also in genes. The process has been demonstrated by the fact that entire populations of bacteria and insects have acquired immunity to the drugs we have unleashed on them. The chemist who created DDT, or Fleming who discovered penicillin, could not have foreseen this. But they unwittingly set up a global experiment that confirmed Darwin's theory. And finally, the most irrefutable proof and the greatest achievement of 21st century biology are gene editing technologies like CRISPR-Cas9. Scientists can now not just observe random mutations, but make precise changes to the DNA of living organisms and see the result. This is not just observing evolution, it is its directed reproduction in the laboratory, proving that it is precisely changes in genes that lie at the heart of life's diversity. Did you know? For every person on the planet, there are over 200 million insects? Over 1 million animal species have been included in scientific catalogs, and more than 3/4 of them are insects. Their world is a true, unexplored universe. Judging by the number of new species registered annually, their number alone could increase by 10 million. The AIDS virus constantly evades drugs through evolution. One of the reasons it is difficult for scientists to combat AIDS is the constant evolution of the virus, requiring the creation of new drugs. The coelacanth looks almost the same as its ancestors from 400 million years ago, and nautiluses have kept their design since the time of the dinosaurs. These creatures seem to have escaped from Earth's ancient chronicle and continue to live alongside us, true living relics of the past. Galapagos tortoises live up to 170 years, and their shells are unique to each island. The first insect wings grew from gills? Yes, that's one of the leading theories. Appearing 350 million years ago, wings likely grew from the gills of their aquatic ancestors. Some fish change their appearance to survive. Guppies change color and size in just a few years to escape predators. Ancient trilobites had crystal eyes. These creatures, which lived 500 million years ago, had eyes with lenses made of a real mineral, calcite. Evolution likes to repeat itself. Marsupials, like the Tasmanian devil, resemble wolves but evolved completely separately. This is an amazing example of convergence. Our ancestors were the size of a mouse? Morganucodon, one of the first mammal ancestors, was a tiny creature running under the feet of dinosaurs 200 million years ago. Octopuses know how to build? Yes, they use coconut shells as portable shelters, a vivid example of the evolution of intelligence. Penguins are birds that forgot how to fly? Exactly. They gave up flight for masterful swimming, becoming true diving birds.
Evolution never stops. Right now, at this very second, invisible mutations and a changing climate are writing the next chapter in the history of life on Earth. What awaits us? What incredible creatures will appear on the planet in 1 million years? We don't have the answers, but we have science, which helps us peer into the future. If this video helped you see the world in a new way, we'd appreciate your like. And to ensure you don't miss our next explorations, subscribe to Terra. Thanks for watching. Stay curious and see you in the next video.